Commander Veltar Koth stretched his forearms and looked at the star charts floating in front of him. The blue scales on his face caught the light from the ship's control panels. Another boring patrol day in the empty space near the Kepler 442 system. He had been doing this job for 20 years, and nothing exciting ever happened here. "Commander!" called Lieutenant Nixara Voss from her station. Her crystal-like skin sparkled as she turned toward him. "I'm getting something strange on sensors." Koth's tail twitched with mild interest. "Define strange, Lieutenant." "Unknown ship, sir. It's not in any of our databases." Voss touched her control panel with delicate fingers. "The design is different. Very different." Koth walked over to look at the sensor display. His experienced eyes studied the readings carefully. The ship was medium-sized, but its shape was all wrong. Most galactic ships were smooth and round, designed for comfort and efficiency. This one looked sharp and dangerous, like a knife floating. "In space. Heat signature is weird, too," Voss added. "It's running much hotter than normal ships, but the energy readings don't match anything we know." "Could be pirates," Koth said. But something felt wrong about that idea. Pirates used stolen ships or cheap copies of known designs. This looked like something completely new. "Should I hail them, sir?" Koth nodded. "Standard first contact protocol. Open channels." Voss worked at her station for a moment, then frowned. "Sir, they're using a very old frequency. I haven't seen this type of signal in the archives for maybe 300 years. A cold feeling crept up Koth's spine. 300 years ago was when the Devourers had swept through this part of the galaxy, destroying entire civilizations. Only a few species had survived by running far away or hiding. "Can you connect?" "Yes, sir. Channel open." Static filled the bridge for a moment, then a clear voice spoke in perfect galactic standard. The accent was strange, but the words were easy to understand. "This is Captain Dae-Ho Kim of the Earth vessel Indomitable. We're on a peaceful exploration mission. Please identify yourself." Koth felt like someone had hit him with a stun weapon. His forearms went limp at his sides. Voss dropped her crystal stylus and it clinked on the floor. "Did he say Earth?" Voss whispered. Earth meant humans, but humans were extinct. Everyone knew that. The Devourers had found their home world 3 centuries ago and wiped them out completely. It was one of the great tragedies that children learned about in school. "Commander?" The human voice came again. "Are you receiving our transmission?" Koth forced himself to speak. "This is Commander Veltar Koth of the Galactic Coalition ship Stellar Dawn. We received your message." He paused, trying to think of the right words. "Did you say you're from Earth?" "That's correct, Commander. Is there a problem?" "A problem." Koth almost laughed, but not because anything was funny. He was talking to a ghost. A member of a dead species flying a ship that shouldn't exist. "Lieutenant," he said quietly to Voss, "send a message to Coalition Command. Tell them we've made contact with humans." Voss stared at him. "Sir, that's impossible. Humans are—" "I know what they are supposed to be," Koth cut her off. "Just send the message." He turned back to the communications panel. "Captain, Kim, we would like to arrange a meeting. Would you be willing to allow a small diplomatic team aboard your vessel?" There was a pause. When the human spoke again, his voice was warm and friendly. "Of course, Commander. We'd be happy to meet with you. We haven't spoken to other galactic citizens in quite some time." "Quite some time," Koth repeated under his breath. If these really were humans, then quite some time meant 300 years of everyone thinking they were dead. "We're sending you docking coordinates now," Captain Kim continued. "Please approach slowly. Our defensive systems are sensitive. Defensive systems." Another chill ran through Koth's body. Humans had been known for their military abilities before the Devourers came. The old stories said they were small and weak compared to most galactic species, but they fought like nothing else in the universe. They never gave up, never retreated, and somehow always found a way to win against impossible odds. "Acknowledged, Captain. We'll approach in 1 hour." The channel closed, leaving the bridge in silence. Koth looked at his small crew, Voss and 2 other junior officers. All of them stared back at him with the same shocked expression. "Sir," said Ensign Korath, a young Rigelian with green fur. "What do we do? The protocols don't cover contact with extinct species." Koth almost smiled at that. The kid was right. There was no rule book for this situation. But his years of experience told him something important. If humans had somehow survived and if they were anything like the legend said, then this was the most important moment of his career. "We follow standard diplomatic procedures," he said finally. "But everyone stays alert. If the old stories are true, then we're about to meet the most dangerous species in the galaxy." "Dangerous?" Voss asked. But Captain Kim sounded so polite. "That," Koth said, checking his sidearm out of habit, "might be the most dangerous thing of all." He spent the next hour reviewing everything he could remember about humans. The database had some information, but most of it was marked as historical, data about an extinct species. Humans were smaller than most galactic races, with only 2 arms and no natural weapons like claws or poison. They came from a world with heavy gravity and dangerous weather, which made them tough and adaptable. But the real stories, the ones passed down by word of mouth among military officers, painted a different picture. Humans didn't just fight battles. They won wars that everyone else thought were impossible to win. They turned disadvantages into advantages and never stopped looking for new solutions to old problems. As their shuttle approached the human ship, Koth could see it more clearly. It was beautiful in a deadly way, like a piece of art designed by a warrior. Every line and curve seemed to have a purpose, and he had no doubt that it could fight if needed. "Docking bay opening," reported their pilot. "They're guiding us in, with some kind of tractor beam I've never seen before." The technology was smooth and precise, settling their shuttle into the human ship like it was coming home. Through the shuttle's windows, Koth could see the docking bay was clean and well organized, with several other small ships that looked equally advanced. "Remember," he told his team as they prepared to leave the shuttle, "we're representing the entire Galactic Coalition. Be respectful, be careful, and try not to start any wars." As the airlock opened, Koth took a deep breath and stepped into what might be the most important meeting in galactic history. He was about to come face to face with a legend that had supposedly been dead for 3 centuries. The legends were about to be tested. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and Koth stepped into the human ship. The first thing that struck him was how different everything looked. Most galactic ships were built for comfort, with soft curves and gentle lighting. This ship felt like it was built for a purpose, and that purpose was not comfort. A human waited for them in the docking bay. He was shorter than Koth, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His clothes were simple but well-made, and he carried himself like someone used to being in charge. "Commander Koth," the human said, stepping forward, with a smile. "I'm Captain Daeho Kim. Welcome aboard the Indomitable." Koth had met many species in his career, but shaking hands with a human felt strange. The captain's grip was firm but not threatening, and his skin was warm to the touch. He looked so normal. If Koth hadn't known better, he might have mistaken him for any other bipedal species. "Thank you for receiving us, Captain," Koth replied. "This is Lieutenant Voss and Ensign Korath." Captain Kim greeted each of them politely, then gestured toward a corridor. "Would you like a tour of the ship? I think you'll find our technology interesting." As they walked through the corridors, Koth noticed everything. The walls were made of some kind of metal he didn't recognize, but it felt strong and light at the same time. The lighting was bright but not harsh, and the air smelled clean and fresh. "Your ship is impressive," Voss said. "The design is unlike anything in our databases." "We've had time to develop our own approach to engineering," Captain Kim replied. 300 years gives you a lot of time to think about how to build things better. 300 years. There it was again, that impossible number. Koth decided to ask the question directly. "Captain, our records show that Earth was destroyed by the Devourers 3 centuries ago. How is it that you're here?" Kim stopped walking and turned to face them. For a moment, his friendly expression became something harder, more serious. "The reports of our death were greatly exaggerated, Commander. Earth survived. We survived." Before Koth could ask more questions, they entered what looked like a science laboratory. A woman in a white coat looked up from a complex piece of equipment. She was smaller than the captain, with short black hair and intelligent eyes behind thin glasses. "This is Dr. Yoonji Park, our chief science officer," Kim said. "Yoonji, these are our guests from the Galactic Coalition." Dr. Park smiled and wiped, her hands on a cloth before shaking hands with each of them. "It's wonderful to meet you. We've been watching Coalition activities for decades, but this is our first direct contact." "Watching us?" Koth asked. "Oh, yes," Dr. Park said cheerfully. "We've been very interested in how galactic civilization has developed since we went quiet. Your technology has advanced in some fascinating directions, though I have to say you've missed some obvious improvements." She gestured to the equipment around them. "For example, your standard power cells are about 60% less efficient than they could be with some simple modifications." Voss leaned forward, interested despite herself. "What kind of modifications?" Dr. Park's eyes lit up, and she began explaining technical details that made Koth's head spin. Within minutes, she had sketched out improvements to Coalition technology that would increase efficiency and reduce costs. She made it look easy, like she was explaining how to make breakfast. "How long did it take you to develop these improvements?" Voss asked. "This particular design?" "About an hour after I scanned your shuttle's power systems." Dr. Park shrugged like it was nothing special. "Reverse engineering and improvement is one of our specialties." An hour. Koth felt another chill. Humans could look at Coalition technology and improve it in an hour? "Yoonji is being modest," Captain Kim said. "She's one of our slower engineers." As they continued the tour, they met more crew members. Lieutenant Taemin Lee was the tactical officer, a quiet man with steady hands and eyes that never stopped moving. When Ensign Korath accidentally bumped into him in the narrow corridor, Lee's reaction was so fast it was almost invisible. One moment he was standing normally, the next he was in a combat stance that made every instinct in Koth's body scream danger. "Sorry," Lee said, relaxing immediately. Old habits that could probably kill someone in seconds," Koth thought. They entered the bridge, and Koth had to stop and stare. It was smaller than most Coalition bridges, but every surface seemed to be covered with displays and controls. The crew moved with a efficiency that spoke of years of training and practice. "How many people are on this ship?" Koth asked. 43, Captain Kim replied. "We tend to build smaller crews than most galactic ships. Humans are good at multitasking." 43. People running a ship this size and complexity. A Coalition ship would need at least twice that number. "Captain," Voss said carefully, "you mentioned watching Coalition activities. How exactly have you been doing that without us knowing?" Kim exchanged a look with Dr. Park. "Perhaps we should discuss this in my ready room. There are things you need to know about the current situation." The ready room was small but comfortable, with a large display screen showing a map of local space. Kim poured drinks for everyone from a dispenser that smelled faintly of something pleasant and spicy. "The truth is," Kim began, "we've been preparing." "Preparing for what?" Koth asked. "The Devourers," Dr. Park said simply. "They're coming back." The room went silent. Koth felt like the air had been sucked out of his lungs. The Devourers hadn't been seen for 300 years. Most people believed they had moved on to other parts of the galaxy or maybe even died out. "That's impossible," Voss whispered. "They're gone. They destroyed what they wanted and left." "They're not gone," Kim said quietly. "They're sleeping, gathering strength. We've been tracking their movements for decades, and all the signs point to a return within the next few years." "How can you be sure?" Koth asked. Dr. Park touched a control, and the display screen showed a complex chart full of energy readings and astronomical data. "We've been monitoring dark space energy signatures, gravitational anomalies, and deep space radio emissions. The pattern is clear if you know what to look for." Koth studied the data, but it was beyond his understanding. "Even if you're right, what can we do? The Devourers destroyed entire fleets. They wiped out civilizations that had been around for millions of years." "Yes," Kim agreed, "but they didn't destroy us. And we've spent 300 years learning from our first encounter with them." "What do you mean?" Kim stood up and walked to the display. "When the Devourers hit Earth, we did what humans do best. We adapted, we learned, and we survived. But Earth was destroyed," Korath said. The surface was damaged, Dr. Park corrected. But humans are very good at living underground. We rebuilt our civilization in places the Devourers never thought to look. For 300 years, we've been studying Devourer technology, tactics, and biology, Kim continued. We've developed countermeasures, new weapons, and strategies specifically designed to fight them. Koth felt overwhelmed. Everything he thought he knew was wrong. Humans weren't extinct. Earth still existed. And if they were right, the greatest threat in galactic history was about to return. What do you want from us? He asked finally. Kim smiled, and for the first time, Koth saw something dangerous in that expression. Not evil or cruel, but determined in a way that made mountains move. We want to save the galaxy, Commander, but we can't do it alone. Captain Kim touched a control on his desk, and the room darkened. A holographic projection appeared in the center of the space, showing the image of a woman in a military uniform. She had gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to look right through. Koth. Commander Koth, the hologram said. I am Admiral Sujin Choi of the Earth Defense Fleet. Captain Kim has told me about your meeting. Koth stood up quickly, his military training taking over. Admiral, it's an honor to meet you. The honor is mine, Commander. It's been a long time since we've spoken with our galactic neighbors. The Admiral's smile was warm, but her eyes remained serious. I understand you have questions about our survival. Many questions, Admiral. Then let me tell you the truth about what happened to Earth. The hologram changed, showing images of Earth as it had been before the Devourer attack. Koth had seen pictures in history books, but these were different. They showed a world full of life, with blue oceans and green continents covered in cities and farms. When the Devourers came, Admiral Choi continued, they expected us to fight like every other species they had encountered. Big fleets in space, massive ground armies, conventional tactics. But humans had learned something important from studying history. The image changed to show the Devourer attack. Massive black ships filled the sky, raining destruction on the planet's surface. But instead of showing humans fighting back in the expected way, the images showed something else entirely. We went underground, the Admiral said. Not just physically, but strategically. We made them think they had won. Dr. Park leaned forward in her chair. You see, Commander, the Devourers have a particular way of thinking. They consume resources and move on. They don't stay to make sure everything is really dead if it stops fighting back. You played dead? Voss asked, her crystal features reflecting amazement. We played smart, Kim corrected. While they were destroying the surface, we were building underground cities, hiding our real population centers, and preparing for the long war. The hologram showed incredible images of vast underground spaces filled with people, machines, and growing plants. Entire cities had been carved out of rock and metal, connected by tunnels and transport systems that stretched across. Continents. How many people survived? Koth asked. Billions, Admiral Choi replied. We lost many in the initial attack, but the majority of our population was safely hidden before the Devourers arrived. You knew they were coming? We suspected. Humans are very good at pattern recognition, Commander. We had been watching the Devourer advance across the galaxy for decades, studying their methods and preparing our response. Engineer Bo-Ram Jung appeared on screen next to the Admiral. She was a small woman with steady hands and oil stains on her work clothes. While my people were hiding, she said, I was learning. Learning what? Korath asked. Everything. Jung replied simply. Devourer technology, their ship designs, their weapons, their communication systems. They left wreckage behind on Earth, and I spent 50 years taking it apart and figuring out how it worked. She gestured, and the hologram showed detailed technical drawings that made Koth's head spin. Once I understood their technology, I started building our own versions. Better versions. Better how? Voss leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her shock. Jung smiled. Humans have a saying, if you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough. We took their technology and added human creativity to it. The display showed ships that looked similar to the Indomitable, sharp, efficient, and somehow dangerous even when just sitting still. Devourer technology is very advanced, Jung continued, but it's also very rigid. They build things one way and never change. Humans build things that can adapt. Show them the comparison test, Dr. Park suggested. Jung nodded, and the hologram changed to show two similar devices side by side. Devourer scanner on the left, human improved version on the right. Same basic function, but ours is 3 times faster, uses half the power, and can scan for things the original was never designed to detect. How long did that improvement take? Voss asked. About 6 hours, Jung said casually. Most of that was waiting for the fabricator to finish building the new components. 6 hours. Koth was beginning to understand why the old stories about humans had been so hard to believe. They weren't just tough or determined, they were impossible. Admiral, he said, why are you telling us this now? Why reveal yourselves after 3 centuries? Admiral Choi's expression became grim. Because the Devourers are stirring again. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected movement in their hibernation zones. Based on our calculations, they will begin their next expansion within 2 to 3 years. And you believe they'll come this way? We know they will. The Devourers follow patterns, Commander. They consume everything in one area, then move to the next. This region of the galaxy is next on their list. Captain Kim stood up and walked to the display. The Coalition forces won't stand a chance against them using conventional tactics. We've seen the current state of galactic military technology, and frankly, it's not enough. Then what do you suggest? Koth asked. An alliance, Admiral Choi said. Humans can provide the technology and strategies needed to fight the Devourers. The Coalition can provide the ships and personnel to make it work. What kind of technology? Voss asked. Jung's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. Adaptive weapons that can change their function mid-battle. Ships that can repair themselves using enemy materials, communication systems that can't be jammed or intercepted, defensive shields that actually get stronger when they're attacked. That sounds impossible, Korath whispered. Humans specialize in impossible things, Dr. Park said with a smile. We've had 300 years to work on this problem, and we've solved it. Multiple times, actually. We kept improving our solutions until we were sure they would work. Koth felt overwhelmed again. How many ships do you have? Enough, Admiral Choi replied. But more importantly, we have the knowledge to upgrade Coalition. Ships to fight effectively against the Devourers. You can really do that? Voss asked. Upgrade our existing fleet? We can make your current ships 10 times more effective, Jung said confidently. 20 times, if you give us access to your manufacturing facilities. The implications were staggering. If humans could really do what they claimed, then the galaxy might actually have a chance against the Devourers. But it also meant that everything Koth thought he knew about military power was wrong. There's something else you need to understand, Kim said quietly. The humans you've met today are not our best people. What do you mean? We mean, Admiral Choi said, that Captain Kim and his crew are explorers and diplomats. They're not our military specialists. A chill ran down Koth's spine. If these incredibly capable people were not the best humans had to offer, what were their real warriors like? How do we know you're telling the truth? He asked. This all sounds too good to be true. Admiral Choi smiled. A healthy skepticism is wise, Commander. Would you like a demonstration? Before Koth could answer, warning alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Lieutenant Lee appeared on the communications screen, his calm voice cutting through the noise. Captain, long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures at the galaxy's edge. Unknown configuration, but the power levels are off the charts. Kim and Dr. Park exchanged glances. How long until they reach inhabited systems? Kim asked. At current speed, approximately 18 months. Admiral Choi's hologram flickered as her image straightened. It seems the Devourers have decided not to wait. Commander Koth, you're about to see firsthand whether the legends about humans are true. The alarms stopped, but the tension in the room remained thick. Koth watched as Captain Kim and Dr. Park worked at their controls with calm efficiency. These humans didn't panic when faced with the return of the galaxy's greatest threat. They just gotta work. Commander, Kim said, I think it's time you saw what we've really been building for the past 3 centuries. He touched a control, and the ship's lights dimmed for a moment. Through the viewport, Space began to change. Ships appeared from nowhere, as if someone had turned off invisible cloaks. First one, then 10, then dozens. Koth's 4 arms went limp at his sides. The human fleet surrounded them in every direction. Each ship was different, but they all shared the same deadly elegance as the Indomitable. Some were sleek and fast-looking, others were massive and heavily armed. All of them looked like they could tear apart anything the Coalition had ever built. "How many?" Voss whispered. "Just the local patrol group," Kim replied casually. "About 60 ships. 60 ships that had been invisible until a moment ago." Koth's military mind was trying to process the implications. If humans could hide entire fleets from Coalition sensors, then everything he knew about space warfare was wrong. A new voice came over the communication system. "Indomitable, this is Captain Young-Soo Han of the destroyer Relentless. Admiral Choi has ordered us to provide a demonstration for our Coalition guests." Through the viewport, Koth could see one of the larger human ships moving closer. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, covered in what looked like weapons and sensor arrays. "Captain Han," Kim replied, "our guests are ready to observe." Holographic image appeared showing Captain Han on his bridge. He was a tall man with graying hair and scars on his hands that spoke of years of hard work. Behind him, Koth could see crew members working at stations with the same calm efficiency he had observed on the Indomitable. "Commander Koth," Han said, "I understand you have questions about human military capabilities." "Many questions, Captain. Then watch and learn." The Relentless moved away from the other ships, positioning itself in open space. Koth watched through the viewport as the ship's hull began to change. Panels slid open, revealing weapons that definitely weren't there before. The ship's shape actually altered itself, becoming more streamlined and aggressive. "Adaptive hull. Technology," Dr. Park explained. "The ship reconfigures itself based on the mission requirements." "That's impossible," Korath said. "Metal doesn't work that way." "Traditional metal doesn't," Jung's voice came over the communication system. "But we don't use traditional metal." The demonstration began with targets that appeared in space. Holographic projections that looked like devourer ships. The Relentless engaged them with weapons that changed their function in real time. A beam that started as an energy weapon became a projectile launcher, then transformed into something that looked like it was tearing holes in space itself. "The weapons adapt to whatever they're fighting," Han explained. "If energy beams don't work, they become kinetic projectiles. If those don't work, they become gravity manipulators. The ship learns and changes." But the real demonstration came when one of the targets began shooting back. The Relentless took hits from simulated devourer weapons, but instead of being damaged, the ship's hull absorbed the energy and used it to power its own systems. "Reactive armor," Jung said proudly. "It doesn't just protect the ship, it makes the ship stronger." Koth watched in amazement as the Relentless actually grew larger during the battle, using enemy fire to build additional hull sections and weapons. Within minutes, a single destroyer had become something that looked like it could fight an entire fleet. "How is any of this possible?" Voss asked. "Nanotechnology," Dr. Park replied. "Self-replicating machines that can reshape matter at the molecular level. We've had 300 years to perfect it." The demonstration ended, and the Relentless returned to its original configuration. But Koth had seen enough to understand that human ships weren't just weapons. They were living, adaptive organisms that could evolve during battle. "Impressive," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But the Devourers destroyed entire civilizations. How do you know this will work against them?" Another voice joined the conversation. "Because we've tested it." A new hologram appeared. Admiral Woojin Park, a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. Her uniform was different from the others, with markings that Koth didn't recognize. "Admiral Park commands our Strategic Operations Division," Kim explained. "She's responsible for planning our anti-devourer campaigns." "Campaigns?" Koth asked. "Plural?" "We've been fighting the Devourers for decades, Commander," Admiral Park said. "Not major battles, but small engagements. Testing our technology, learning their current capabilities, preparing for the real war." "You've been fighting them? How is that possible?" "Devourer scout ships sometimes investigate systems they've already conquered," she explained. "When they return to Earth, we capture them. Sometimes we hunt them down in deep space. My teams have been very busy. The casual way she said it made Koth's blood run cold. Humans had been hunting devourers like they were common criminals. Show him the capture footage, Han suggested. Admiral Park nodded, and the hologram changed to show what looked like a battle recording. A small devourer ship, still massive by galactic standards, was being surrounded by human vessels. But instead of destroying it, the humans were using some kind of technology to disable its weapons and engines. We needed live specimens, Park explained as they watched human marines board the enemy ship. You can't understand your enemy if you only fight them. You have to study them. You captured a devourer ship? Korath asked in disbelief. 17 ships, actually, Park replied. Plus, we've taken apart their technology, interrogated their crew, and learned their communication protocols. Sergeant Hyojin Kang appeared on screen next to Admiral Park. She was a small woman, but she moved like a predator, and her eyes held the kind of confidence that came from facing the worst the universe had to offer and winning. The Devourers aren't as tough as everyone thinks, Kang said. They're used to enemies that fight the same way every time. They don't know how to handle opponents who change tactics mid-battle. What do you mean? Koth asked. Kang smiled, and it was not a comfortable expression. Devourers are like computers, Commander. Very powerful, very fast, but they follow programs. If you can break their programming, they become confused and vulnerable. And humans are very good at breaking programming, Admiral Park added. We specialize in doing unexpected things. The hologram showed more footage. Human soldiers fighting devourers in ways that made no tactical sense, but somehow worked perfectly. They used the enemy's own weapons against them, turned devourer technology into traps, and fought battles that looked more like elaborate pranks than military actions. The key, Park continued, is that devourers expect logical, predictable responses. Humans are neither logical nor predictable. We're creative, adaptive, and willing to try things that should be impossible. How many people do you have trained for this kind of warfare? Voss asked. All of them, Kang replied simply. All of them? Every human born in the last 3 centuries has been trained to fight devourers, Admiral Park explained. It's part of our education system. By the time they're adults, every human knows at least 12 different ways to disable devourer technology and 17 ways to turn their weapons against them. Koth felt overwhelmed again. An entire species trained from birth to fight the greatest threat in galactic history, children who learned anti-devourer tactics the way other species learned mathematics. But even with all this, he said, you're still just one species. The devourers have fleets that stretch across solar systems. That's true, Admiral Park agreed, which is why we need the coalition. We have the knowledge and technology to win, but we need ships and people to make it work on a galactic scale. What exactly are you proposing? Koth asked. A complete upgrade of coalition military capabilities, Kim said. We'll provide the technology to convert your existing ships into devourer killers. We'll train your people in our tactics. And we'll coordinate a galaxy-wide defense that actually has a chance of working. In exchange for what? Help us save everyone, Admiral Choi's voice said as her hologram reappeared. Humans don't want to rule the galaxy, Commander. We just want to make sure there's still a galaxy to live in. As Koth looked around at the human fleet surrounding them, he realized that the choice wasn't really his to make. These people had spent centuries preparing for this moment. They had the power to save the galaxy or to rule it, and they were choosing to save it. The legends about humans hadn't been exaggerated. If anything, they hadn't gone far enough. Koth stood on the bridge of the Coalition command ship Aurora's Pride, watching the sensor displays with growing horror. The Devourers had arrived ahead of schedule, and they were everything the old stories said they would be. Worse, actually. The enemy fleet stretched across space like a living nightmare. Each ship was the size of a small moon, covered in organic-looking growths that pulsed with dark energy. They moved together like a school of fish, but each one was a floating city capable of destroying entire worlds. Coalition forces are retreating from the outer systems, reported Admiral Velnara, the Andromedan commander of the defense fleet. Her crystalline features were pale with fear. We've lost contact with the 3rd and 7th battle groups. Lost. Contact? Koth asked, though he already knew what that meant. Destroyed, Commander, completely. The Devourers tore through them like they weren't even there. Koth had been promoted to Special Liaison after his meeting with the humans. Coalition Command wanted someone who understood the human perspective to coordinate their response. Now he was watching 3 centuries of Coalition military development prove utterly useless against an enemy that treated their best ships like annoying insects. "What about the human fleet?" he asked. "Still approaching from the inner systems," Velnara replied. "They should arrive within 6 hours." 6 hours. Koth wondered if there would be anything left to save by then. The main display showed the latest battle reports. Devourer ships didn't just destroy Coalition vessels, they consumed them. The enemy absorbed metal, energy, and even crew members, using everything to make themselves stronger. Each victory made them more dangerous. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Commander Zektar from the sensor station, "the Devourers are doing something new." "Define new," Velnara said grimly. "Their ships are changing, growing. It looks like they're adapting to our weapons in real time." On the display, Koth could see Devourer vessels reshaping themselves. Hull sections that had been damaged by Coalition weapons were growing new armor specifically designed to resist those same weapons. It was like watching a disease learn to fight medicine. How is that possible? "The same way everything else about them is possible," Velnara said bitterly. "They're beyond our understanding." A communication alert sounded. "Coalition command to all ships," came a voice from headquarters. "Emergency retreat to inner defensive lines." "Repeat, full retreat to inner defensive lines." "Admiral," Koth said, "what about the colony worlds? There are billions of people in the outer systems." Velnara's expression was grim. "We can't save them, Commander. Our weapons barely scratch. Their hulls and their technology adapts faster than we can change tactics. This isn't a battle. It's an extinction event." Koth watched the sensor displays as Coalition ships fled deeper into their own territory, abandoning world after world to the advancing Devourers. It was the largest military disaster in galactic history, and it was happening in real time. Then new signals appeared on sensors. "Admiral," Zektar called out, "I'm detecting ships approaching from the Sol system. Configuration matches human vessels." "How many?" Velnara asked. "Sensors are having trouble getting an accurate count. The readings keep changing." "What do you mean, changing?" "It's like their ships are shifting somehow. The sensor returns don't match anything in our databases." Koth felt a familiar chill. He had seen human adaptive technology before, but only in demonstrations. Now he was about to see it in actual combat against the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy. "Put me through to the human fleet," he ordered. The communication screen activated, showing the familiar face of Admiral Sujin Choi. But something was different about her now. She looked like someone who had spent her entire life preparing for this moment and was finally ready to act. "Commander Koth," she said, "I assume you're watching the current situation." "Admiral, the Coalition forces are being destroyed. The Devourers are adapting to everything we throw at them. We know. We've been monitoring their progress. It's time for the real battle to begin." "How many ships do you have?" Choi smiled, and for the first time, Koth saw something in her expression that made him understand why humans had survived the first Devourer attack. "Enough, Commander. More than enough." The human fleet began to decloak around them. Koth had thought he had seen their numbers before, but this was different. Hundreds of ships appeared, then thousands. They filled space in every direction, forming patterns that looked almost artistic in their complexity. "General Minho Yoon will be coordinating our ground operations," Choi continued as another figure appeared on screen. The general was a large man with scars on his face and hands that spoke of personal combat experience. "Commander Ji-hoon Shin leads our special operations teams." Shin was smaller than the general, but he moved like someone who could kill you with a spoon and make it look like an accident. His eyes held the kind of cold intelligence that came from years of solving impossible problems with limited resources. "Dr. Seojin Moon is our xenobiologist," Choi continued. "She spent the last century studying Devourer physiology and developing ways to exploit their weaknesses." Dr. Moon looked like a kindly grandmother, but when she smiled at the camera, Koth got the distinct impression that she found Devourers interesting in the way a scientist finds bacteria interesting. "Weaknesses?" Velnara asked. "The Devourers don't have weaknesses." "Everything has weaknesses," Dr. Moon replied cheerfully. "You just have to know where to look. Devourers are biological machines, which means they follow biological rules. And biological rules can be broken." The human fleet moved forward, and Koth watched in amazement as their ships began to change. Hulls reconfigured themselves, weapons emerged from hidden compartments, and entire sections of ships transformed into configurations he had never seen before. The key to fighting devourers, General Yoon explained as his ships moved into battle formation, is to never fight them the same way twice. They adapt to consistent tactics, so we use inconsistent tactics. What does that mean? Velnara asked. Watch and learn, Commander Shin said. The first engagement was unlike anything Koth had ever seen. Human ships approached the Devourers using conventional tactics, firing standard energy weapons and missile systems. The enemy ships began adapting, growing new armor and defenses exactly as they had against coalition forces. Then the humans changed everything. Ships that had been firing energy weapons suddenly launched clouds of what looked like space dust. The Devourers ignored it, focusing on the larger threats. But the dust wasn't dust. It was millions of tiny machines that began eating the Devourer hulls from the outside in. Nanobots, Dr. Moon explained happily, programmed to consume specific materials and reproduce using the consumed matter. Very effective against biological hulls. As the Devourers tried to adapt to the nanobots, human ships switched to entirely different weapons. Gravity manipulators that twisted space around enemy vessels. Quantum disruptors that caused matter to exist and not exist at the same time. Temporal distorters that made parts of Devourer ships experience time at different rates. How do you have so many different types of weapons? Koth asked. We don't, Shin replied. We have adaptive weapons that can become whatever we need them to be. The same system that was shooting energy beams 5 minutes ago is now manipulating gravity. The Devourers can't adapt to weapons that don't have a consistent configuration. But the real surprise came when the Devourers tried to consume human ships the way they had consumed coalition vessels. The human ships let them try. General, your ship is being boarded, Velnara warned. I know, Yoon replied calmly. We're ready for them. Through the communication link, Koth could hear sounds of battle from inside the human ships. But instead of the screams and chaos he expected, he heard laughter, efficient combat commands, and what sounded like someone giving a cooking lesson. The secret to fighting Devourers up close, came a cheerful voice over the communication system, is to remember that they're basically very large, very aggressive parasites, and parasites hate it when their hosts fight back. Who is that? Koth asked. Sergeant Major Park Jin-woo, Yoon replied proudly. He's teaching the Devourers why boarding a human ship is a bad idea. The sounds of battle continued, but they became less frantic and more systematic. Human soldiers weren't just fighting. The invaders, they were studying them, learning their weaknesses, and turning their own biology against them. We've been preparing for this fight for 300 years, Dr. Moon said as she watched the data streaming in from the battles. Every human soldier knows 17 different ways to disable a Devourer drone, and 23 ways to turn their weapons against them. But there are so many of them, Velnara protested. Yes, Choi agreed. And everyone we destroy teaches us more about how to destroy the rest. As Koth watched, the tide of battle began to turn. Human adaptive technology was proving superior to Devourer evolution. The enemy could adapt to any single tactic, but humans were using dozens of different approaches simultaneously, switching between them faster than the Devourers could compensate. Admiral, Zektar called out. Something's happening to the Devourer command ship. The largest enemy vessel, a massive, biomechanical horror that dwarfed everything around it, was beginning to glow with ominous energy. It's charging some kind of weapon, Velnara said. The Devourer command ship continued to build energy, its massive hull pulsing with power that made space itself seem to bend around it. Koth had seen planet-killer weapons before in historical records, but this was beyond anything in the databases. This weapon could destroy entire star systems. All coalition ships retreat to minimum safe distance, Admiral Velnara ordered. Emergency evacuation of all inhabited worlds in the target zone. But the human ships moved closer. Admiral Choi, Koth called over the communication link. Your fleet is moving toward the weapon. That's suicide. No, Commander, came a new voice. It belonged to Admiral Dong-Hyun Lim, Supreme Commander of the human fleet. He was an older man, with gray hair and eyes that had seen impossible things and made them possible. That's a solution. On the sensor displays, Koth watched as a single human ship separated from the fleet. It was smaller than most of the others, but it moved with a purpose that made his military instincts scream warnings. That's the Phoenix, Admiral Choi explained. Captain So Young Nam commanding. Captain Nam appeared on the communication screen. She was young, maybe 30 years old, with steady hands and the kind of calm confidence that came from knowing exactly what you were going to do and why it would work. Phoenix ready for final approach, she reported. All systems green. Captain, Koth said, you're flying directly into the path of a planet-killer weapon. Yes, sir, Nam replied cheerfully. That's the plan. The plan? Commander, Admiral, Lim said. What do you know about devourer biology? They're biomechanical organisms that consume matter and energy to grow stronger. Correct. But they're also a collective consciousness. Every devourer ship, every drone, every weapon system is connected to a central hive mind. That's their greatest strength. And their greatest weakness, Dr. Moon added, appearing on screen. You see, Commander, collective consciousness is very efficient, but it has one critical flaw. If you can access the network, you can affect the entire system. Koth watched as the Phoenix approached the Devourer command ship. The massive weapon was almost fully charged, its energy building to levels that would crack planets, but the small human ship showed no signs of fear or hesitation. What exactly are you planning to do? Velnara asked. We're going to give them something better to think about, Engineer Jae-Sung-Oh said, joining the conversation. He was a small man with ink-stained fingers and the kind of smile that suggested he enjoyed solving impossible problems. 300 years ago, Oh continued, when the Devourers first attacked Earth, we learned something important about their psychology. They're not evil, Commander. They're hungry. Hungry? The Devourers consume because they need to. It's not cruelty or malice, it's survival. They devour civilizations because they need the energy and resources to keep their collective consciousness alive. Dr. Moon nodded. But what if we could give them something better? Something that would satisfy their needs without destroying other species? On the display, the Phoenix had reached the outer edge of the Devourer command ship's defensive field. Instead of being destroyed by the massive weapons, it seemed to be welcomed. The enemy ship's defenses parted like a curtain, allowing the tiny human vessel to approach. How is that possible? Koth asked. We're speaking their language, Captain Nam explained. Not their communication language, their biological language. The Phoenix is broadcasting chemical signals that tell the Devourers we're not a threat. We're offering them something they want. What could you possibly offer them that they want? Engineer O smiled wider. A better way to live. The Phoenix disappeared into the Devourer command ship, swallowed by organic openings that closed behind it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the massive weapon began to power down. What's happening? Velnara asked. Captain Nam is making a presentation, Admiral Lim replied calmly. A presentation? To the Devourer collective consciousness. We're showing them our solution to their problem. Through the communication link, they could hear Captain Nam's voice, calm and professional as she spoke to an audience no one else could see. The energy requirements for your collective consciousness are massive, she was saying. But consuming organic civilizations is an inefficient method of gathering that energy. We'd like to show you some alternatives. She's talking to them? Koth asked in amazement. She's negotiating, Dr. Moon corrected. The Devourers are intelligent, Commander. They've been consuming civilizations for millions of years because they thought it was the only way to survive. We are offering them proof that there are better options. On the sensor displays, something incredible was happening. The Devourer fleet was changing, but not in the way they had adapted to weapons. The ships were restructuring themselves, their biomechanical hulls shifting from predatory configurations to something that looked almost peaceful. What are you showing them? Koth asked. Stellar engineering, Engineer O replied proudly. How to harvest energy directly from stars without destroying the planets around them, how to build matter converters that can create any resource they need from basic elements, how to maintain their collective consciousness without consuming other intelligent species. You can do all that? We learned how during our 3 centuries underground, Admiral Choi explained. When you're hiding from an enemy that can consume entire worlds, you get very good at finding efficient ways to use resources. Through the Phoenix's communication system, they could hear the Devourer collective consciousness responding. It wasn't language in any traditional sense, but somehow the human translation systems made it understandable. This efficiency is acceptable, the voice said, sounding like a billion individuals speaking in perfect unison. Your solution requires consideration. Take all the time you need, Captain Nam replied. But while you're considering, maybe you could stop pointing that planet-killer weapon at inhabited systems? The massive weapon powered down completely. Around the galaxy, Devourer ships began to change their course, moving away from populated worlds and toward empty systems where they could implement the new techniques without harming anyone. Is it working? Koth asked. Better than we hoped, Dr. Moon said, studying the incoming data. The collective consciousness is designed to find the most efficient solutions to problems. Once we showed them that consumption was less efficient than creation, they started adapting immediately. But will it last? That depends on us, Admiral Lim said. The Devourers need guidance to implement these new techniques. They're asking for human advisors to help them transition to the new methods. You're going to work with them? We're going to teach them, Admiral Choi corrected. The same way we'll teach coalition forces how to defend against future threats. Knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied. Over the following hours, Koth watched as the greatest threat in galactic history transformed into the galaxy's newest allies. Devourer ships began converting asteroids into useful materials instead of consuming inhabited worlds. Their biomechanical technology started producing resources instead of consuming them. Captain Nam emerged from the command ship with a formal alliance treaty, signed by representatives of the collective consciousness. The Devourers would share their advanced biotechnology in exchange for human engineering knowledge and guidance in implementing sustainable resource gathering. How did you know this would work? Velnara asked as the immediate crisis passed. We didn't, Admiral Lim admitted. But humans have a saying, when you can't win by fighting, try talking. The Devourers had been fighting for millions of years because no one had ever tried talking to them. And if talking hadn't worked, Engineer O grinned, then we had 17 backup plans, each one more creative than the last. Humans are very good at backup plans. As the fleets began to disperse and the emergency passed, Koth found himself thinking about everything he had witnessed. The humans hadn't defeated the Devourers through superior weapons or overwhelming force. They had solved the problem by understanding it and finding a better solution. Admiral Choi, he said, what happens now? Now we get to work, she replied. The galaxy is a big place, Commander, and there are a lot of problems that need solving. The Devourers were just the beginning. You're planning to solve all the galaxy's problems? We're planning to teach everyone how to solve their own problems, Dr. Moon corrected. Humans don't want to rule the galaxy, Commander. We want to help it grow. As Koth returned to his ship and began writing his report to Coalition Command, he realized that everything had changed. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, but not in the way anyone had expected. Humans had emerged not as conquerors, but as teachers, engineers, and problem solvers. The legends about humans had been true, but they had focused on the wrong things. Human strength wasn't in their ability to fight impossible battles. It was in their ability to turn impossible battles into solvable problems. The legends were true, Koth wrote in his final report to Coalition Command, but they didn't go far enough. Humans don't just survive extinction events, they evolve beyond them. And now, thanks to them, so can the rest of us. In the end, the greatest human weapon wasn't a ship or a technology or a tactic. It was hope, the stubborn, impossible, utterly human belief that every problem had a solution if you were creative enough to find it.